Welcome to part 4 of chapter 7. In this part, we will talk about estimating project costs. Project managers must take cost estimates seriously if they want to complete project within budget constraints. In other words, quite a bit of time, effort, by effort we mean research, estimation, brainstorming, and the time has to be put into those cost constraints to make sure they're realistic, they're correct, they're adequate, so that you don't have any substantial deviations or variances from the initially agreed upon budget. To make your cost estimates reliable, it is important to know the types of cost estimates, how to prepare cost estimates, and typical problems associated with IT costing. So we'll start with a brief discussion on the types of cost estimates. There are three main types of cost estimates. The first type is called rough order of magnitude, or ROM. Those estimates are done very early in the project life cycle, sometimes 3 to 5 years before actual project completion. Why it is done? Well, it is done to provide estimate of cost for selection decision. In other words, those costs are just rough guidelines for deciding which project will be actually selected or which particular solution will be selected, but it's largely about like rough estimation so that preliminary decisions can be made. And obviously, those rough order of magnitude estimates are not very accurate. You can have a variance of something to the tune of minus 50% to 100%. After that, after those initial estimates, project managers and the team can prepare the so-called budgetary estimates. So it's done, relatively early, typically like 1 or 2 years out. What it means, like close to the actual start or completion of the project. Close to the actual completion point of the project. So way into the into the life cycle of the project. So like 1 or 2 years later. Um, so obviously, as you can tell from the name, those kind of estimates are done to prepare the budget. And since you're much closer to the actual project completion date, the variance, the accuracy is improves. You can have variance something like to the tune of minus 10% plus 25%. Uh, and then you have the so-called definite estimates, the ones that are done when you're already into the project execution, and this is when you can really find out the actual cost. You may be planning to purchase, let's say servers for X amount, but it's only when you're, when you started the procurement process when you find out the actual cost of procuring a server from a particular vendor. So those are definite estimates, and the variance is minus, fairly close to the actual amount, within 5-10%. Also, something that needs to be done to manage cost is to prepare the so-called cost management plan. It's a document that describes how the organization will manage cost variances on the project. Cost variances are unavoidable. Nobody can predict future cost with 100% precision. So if there is any kind of deviation, there needs to be a formal procedure for somebody to request additional funding, and that additional funding, of course, will change the original budget estimates. So there needs to be a formal procedure for doing that. You need to specify what kind of form needs to be submitted, who will be looking at those budgetary requests, what are the criteria for approving those requests, and who are the people or the committee responsible for those requests. A large percentage of total project costs are often labor costs, so project managers must, at least initially, focus on developing and track estimates for labor. It's a good starting point. In IT, just like any area of knowledge work, labor costs are the most significant component of a budget, so it makes sense to always start with the labor budget. And a good starting point would be headcount for the years when the project will be carried out. So here you will say that, well, in year one, when the project is initiated and planned for, we need 24 people. Then when we go into the execution in year 2 and year 3, we need to increase our headcount to 31 and then to 35 people. And then when we go into the operations or maintenance, we only need a team of 13 people to maintain and manage the operations. So, if you think about it this way, then it's a good starting point, because as I said before, labor accounts for a large portion of the total budget. What are some other cost estimation tools and techniques? There are three approaches to estimating costs. One approach is called analogous or top-down estimate. You use the actual cost of a previous similar project as the basis for estimating the cost of the current project, right? So you can do some research either internally within your organization to find information, to find records about prior project, or somewhere externally, meaning you can search some industry reports, consulting reports, to see how much it costs to do certain activities within a project. And then based on those estimates, you will say, well, last year, we did this and we spent X amount, this year because of inflation and because of the greater magnitude, we're gonna spend 1.5x on the same task that is a part of a different project. So I think analogous is the most fair way of estimating because it's based on real life, right? It's not based on some kind of gamble or it's not based on betting on the future, how things will evolve. It's based on how things were actually done in the past. Then you have bottom-up estimates. It involves estimating individual work items or activities and summing them to get a project total. So you start with the small tasks because usually small tasks are easier to analyze, easier to get you to wrap your brain around. And once you figure out approximate price or cost for those individual little activities, you can aggregate them to higher order activities. And then you have parametric modeling. It uses project characteristics parameters in a mathematical model to estimate project cost. So the way it works, usually you have some sort of mathematical model based on formulas, let's say implemented using Excel, and then you plug in different parameters. Let's say those parameters will reflect the number of team members that you have on working on your project, the number of licenses that you're going to purchase. Then you can also enter the number of users. Then you can enter some risk factors, and based on that, based on all those parameters, the model will spit out, will give you certain estimates about future cost. So you can try like different optimistic, pessimistic scenario to get a range of cost estimates, saying, well, the cost will be somewhere between X1 and X2. So this is parametric modeling approach. Some of the typical problems associated with IT cost estimates. First of all, sometimes they're done too quickly because project managers are under a lot of pressure to submit a project proposal, get it approved, so not enough time is spent thinking about cost estimates. Sometimes it has to do with lack of estimating experience. For example, experienced project managers, they know about contingency reserve, they know that there is something unexpected always happens, they know the reality of doing things as opposed to thinking about doing things. So they are typically, experience helps you come up with a more realistic, with a set of more realistic, more precise cost estimates for your project. Also, it's a very well-known psychological phenomenon where human beings are biased towards underestimation. They always underestimate the amount of time or the amount of money it will take them to do something. Personally, I think it has to do with the fact that large numbers, large sums, they scare people and they don't want to think about those things. So if somebody doesn't want to think that it may cost $1 million to do like a small project, if he or she starts thinking that this project somehow will cost only $300,000, then emotionally it's much more comforting than thinking about those large amounts. So it's a well-known, empirically proven phenomena that humans always underestimate the amount of money that they will spend on something. Something along the lines, like you go on a vacation, right? So you're trying to estimate how much money you spend, and you're saying, well, I'm gonna spend X amount on flight, Y amount on hotel, and that's it. That's how much I will spend for my vacation. And somewhere at the back of your mind, you understand there will be other expenses such as dining out, going out, visiting places, buying souvenirs, who knows what, but you want to keep it away because it makes you feel better that you will only spend X plus Y as opposed to X plus Y plus Z, on this trip. Now, the problem is that management desires accuracy. Everybody understands that those cost estimates are by definition estimates, but nevertheless, because of the planning horizons that management may have in front of them, they need certain degree of accuracy. I mean, they don't want people to change their estimates every month or every year, because some companies, at least they have like a 1-year budget. Sometimes they may have a 5-year budget. So they want precise information to be entered in those budgets. So as long as you provide like realistic estimates, probably somewhere more on the on the overestimation side, then you should be okay, because if you exceed your cost targets a little bit, there will be still room to get additional funding. However, if you're trying to underestimate things, to impress management, to get their approval, then it will be a big problem, because they may not be able to give you additional funds if you go over the initial estimates. So what we're going to do next, we're going to look at some sample cost estimates. A few comments before I show you this table. You know, first of all, it's based on the work breakdown structure. So you take your work breakdown structure and you see all those categories, and then you try to come up with a reasonable estimate for every item in the work breakdown structure. So it's something along those lines. So you have different work breakdown structure items. You have those aggregate items, or you know, higher level items, and then you have those items broken into specifics. So you come up with those specific estimates. For example, project management. How much will it cost you to manage the project? So you need to hire a project manager, and you're estimating that you know, you'll spend 960 hours of that project manager to manage the project, and the cost per hour is $100. Although in reality, it could be probably more than that, something to the tune of $150. So that would be the total price of a full-time project manager. Then project team members, again, hourly estimate. You know, this is how many hours you will need from them. Those are man hours, so you may have several team members working on the project, and then you multiply it by wage per hour. You get labor cost for team members. Then you also hire a contractor. So let's say 10% of software development and testing will be devoted to hiring contractors who will do this testing or development. So that will be like a fixed amount, fixed fee. So with all those estimates, you will come up with a total you know, management expense of $306,000. Then for hardware, it's relatively easy. You just count the devices, like handheld devices and servers, and you multiply the counts by price per unit. Software is a bit complicated. When it comes to licensing, again, it's straightforward. You multiply the number of licenses by the cost per license. When it comes to software development, we'll briefly analyze, you know, two approaches to that. Then testing is simply estimated as 10% of the overall development budget. It's 10% of the total hardware and software budget. Then training and support cost, it's on a per user basis, so it's relatively straightforward. And then it's a wise thing to add some reserves, 20% of the total estimate. So in total, your budget is as follows. Now let's zoom in on software development cost. Now probably the easiest, but maybe not very precise way of estimating software development cost is in terms of labor hours. Again, it can be like some kind of analogous estimate where you look at how many hours a particular team spent previously developing a similar software product. So you estimate those hours, and then you multiply by the hourly wage, and you get the total estimate for your software development. So it's based on labor, right? Or you can also do it based on functional points. Now it's a somewhat complicated way of doing it. You know, the essence of this approach is that, you know, each module, each software module is broken down into units or specific functional points, right? And then you have some conversion factor, meaning how difficult those functional points are. So based on that, you will come up with some kind of number that reflects the functionality or complexity of the module. And then there will be like cost estimates based on lines of code. So it's not related to labor, it's more related to the complexity and the size of the code. Okay, so you will come up with the following estimate. If you want to read more about this method, which is a big methodology, it has a lot of details, then you can read the following paper and white paper. And I already posted this white paper in the handout section of Canvas. So you can, there are 4 white papers that you need to read to understand how to use this methodology for estimating software cost. Now, for the purposes of this class, I'm not requiring you to do this, to estimate software development cost using this functional point approach. Instead, just use the labor estimate. So that completes part 4 of chapter 7. Thank you for watching.